Okay, starting Module 4, our Chapter 12 is Establishing a Pay Structure. So decisions about pay, job structure, relative pay for different jobs within an organization. The company I used to work for had different grades, and each job was given a grade, and therefore that dictated what pay structure they had. The pay policy results from job structure and pay level decisions, and pay level is the average amount an organization pays for a particular job. So they would have many people that worked as, say, accountants in various cities and various locations, but they all had a range that they made like 40 to 50,000, because that's what the pay range was. So what are some issues in developing a pay structure? Well, there's legal requirements. You have to give equal pay for equal work, minimum wage, overtime, restrictions on child labor. There may be market forces involved like there is right now, product markets as well as labor markets. The organization's goal is high quality workforce, cost control, equity and fairness, and legal compliance. So put all that together, you have to pay a level decision, job structure decision, pay structures decisions, pay rates, the grades, the ranges, and the differentials. So which of the statement below do you think about pay do you feel most strongly about? Pay decisions should be based on performance, not seniority. Pay decisions should be based strictly on experience and seniority. I would like to know what my workers get paid. I don't want to know what I do not want anyone other than my boss knowing my salary. Pay secrecy helps a company stay competitive. What do you think? Your answers vary. A lot of people don't like people to know how much they make, but a lot of times it gets out there anyway. So. Okay, equal employment opportunity difference in pay must not be based on the employee's age, sex, race, or other protected statuses. Laws do not guarantee equal pay. There are so many legitimate factors that influence a person's earnings. Comparable worths policy and the Lilly-led Fair Pay Act of 2009. This was covered in the film RPG if you did the extra credit assignment. Lily was working at the same job and found out that her male counterparts made more than her, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court found that yes, the statute of limitations had basically run out. It was too late for her to say anything now, but the thing was she didn't know they were making more than she was, so she couldn't adhere to the time. So they actually wrote legislation, the Congress did, and named it after her, that said that there shouldn't be a time limit. It should be from when you find out. So two employees who do the same job cannot be paid different wages because of race or age. Only if there's differences in their experience, skills, seniority, or job performance are there legal reasons to pay why their pay might be different. Some legal requirements for pay. Well, we've got the minimum wage. The lowest amount employers must pay under federal or state law. States is an amount is a pay per hour. The Fair Labor Relations Standards Act, a federal law that establishes the minimum wage and the requirements for paying overtime and child labor. Overtime pay. Overtime is hours worked beyond 40 hours per week. It's not 8 hours a day, because you can work 4 10-hour days and get 40 hours of work in. So under FLSA, employers must pay 1.5 times the employee's usual rate for overtime hours. So there can be exempt employees, which are managers. You have to meet specific requirements to be considered an exempt employee. Like you have to manage 2 employees. You have to make a certain amount. I think it's 47,000 or more. Non-exempt employees, there are covered requirements. They get unemployment, basically. And that's something the Labor Department will look for when they come in to see if you're paying overtime to who you have to pay overtime to. Child labor, it sharply restricts the use of child labor. A child under 14 may not be employed except for on a family farm or for newspapers. Children 14 and 15 may work only outside school hours in non-hazardous jobs and for very limited time periods. 16 and 17-year-olds may not be employed in hazardous jobs, so basically I can't use a knife, I can't use motorized equipment or anything like that if I'm 16 or 17. The exemptions would be babysitting, acting, and delivering newspapers. Prevailing wage. Federal contractors must pay employees at least equal to the prevailing wages in the area. The Davis-Bacon Act of 1931 or the Walsh-Healy Public Contracts Act of 1936 covers this. Pay ratio reporting. We must report the ratio of the CEO pay to the pay of the median employee. It is intended to increase transparency and make it more social responsible, vital part of pay policies. So product markets influence pay because the organizations that offer similar goods or services probably pay about the same amount. Organizations compete on the quality, service, and price. Cost of labor, a significant part of the organization costs. Organizations must compete to obtain human resources. Competition establishes minimum pay to hire an employee for a job. So, okay, there's a strong demand for nurses in the labor department. This means that hospitals may have to pay competitive wages. When you think about supply and demand and the supply and demand curve, if you've taken economics yet, when the demand is high, the rate of pay is going to go up that intersection of supply and demand, and it helps me make more money if I'm a nurse. Okay, so deciding what to pay. Ranges depend on a competitive market and competitive environment. You can do a lot of research. Like you can go to like monster.com and search for accountants in the Buffalo area, and it'll give you a range of what they should make, which is very helpful as a starting guide. Pay policies are one of the most important HR tools to encourage desired behaviors and discourage undesired behaviors. When I worked at the company I used to work for before I came to the college, they decided to look at my pay. I didn't ask them to, but they picked me out of the bunch and decided to look, and then they determined I should be making more money, and I got a $4,000 raise. So that was nice. And they did. They kept me happy. I stayed there for several more years after that. I only left to come here to college because this is what I always wanted to do. So gathering information about market pay, benchmarking, you can look at that monster, and that could be your benchmark. Okay, accountants make 40 to 50,000, so I need to incorporate that. There are other sources for information that you can do. Pay surveys. Bureau of Labor Statistics has a lot of information. The Society for Human Resource Management, or even consulting groups. So how do you judge fairness or equity? Employees judge fairness in different ways. External equity, the fairness of one's pay relative to people who work in other organizations doing the same job, and that's what the company did for me. They looked at different firms and found that I should be making more. Internal equity is the fairness relative to my coworkers or my peers. Employee responses to judgment of equity can have a great impact on the organization. And there's just a nice little graphic about being fair with pay, and I just zoomed down the list here, so give me a second, I gotta go back up. Employees who perceive they are under-rewarded are likely to make up the difference in 1 of 3 ways. They might put forth less effort. They might find ways to increase outcomes, like stealing their outcome, meaning their paycheck, withdrawing or leaving or refusing to cooperate. So how do we communicate fairness? Employees care about their pay relative to other people's pay. These feelings are based on what the employees perceive. Employees can easily gather information about pay data using the internet. Employees should be transparent about pay policy with employees, especially if pay is competitive or generous. Job evaluation measures relative internal worth of the organization's jobs. The committee identifies each job's compensatable factors. Jobs rated for each factor based on that. So what would be compensatable factors? Experience, education, complexity, work conditions, and responsibility. Key jobs. The organization can define key jobs to help create pay structures. Key jobs have relatively stable content and are common amongst many organizations. Pay for key jobs is based on survey data. So Mariah found out a friend of hers, Joanne, works a similar job in the same town, making significantly more money than she does, and she's not happy about it. Which of the following is probably a cause of this difference in pay? The companies are in different product markets with different pay strategies. Mariah's job is non-exempt. Joanne's job involves intensive use of computers. or all of the above. This one really could be any of these. We don't have enough information really to decide, so they could all be factors in what we're doing and how she's getting paid more than the other person. Okay, putting it all together, hourly wage times we could have, you're paid $10 an hour, that's an hourly wage. Most people get paid that way. But you could get paid by each unit produced, like if you had to make a widget and you had to make 100 widgets a day. Any widgets over that 100 you get an extra rate for. Or you could get salary, which is a rate of pay per week, per month, per year. So that's basically how I'm paid. They just take my annual salary and divide it among pay periods. So the rates of key jobs can be based on market research. Non-key jobs have no survey data available. Professionals must base rate off of job evaluations by plotting lines on a graph. And here's an example of one of those graphs. So we talked a little bit earlier about pay grades. It's a set of jobs worth having similar worth or content grouped together to establish fair rates of pay. So, you had grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, and they all covered a different range. It may not match market rate. I may decide to pay my employees more than the going rate, so my pay grade might be a little bit higher. Popular actors such as Joanne Johnson are evaluated by their impact on the box office receipts. So if they make more money in box office receipts than the next movie, they can demand a higher rate. Pay ranges, set of possible pays defined by minimum, maximum, and midpoint of pay for employees holding a particular job or job within a particular pay range. Flexibility helps organizations balance conflicting job information and evaluation and market surveys. And usually pay ranges will overlap, and that's been my experience. They've always overlapped. So here's kind of an example of different pay grades, and you can see the overlap there as well. Pay differentials is an adjustment to pay rate reflecting differences in working conditions or labor markets. For example, if I have an accountant in Buffalo and I have an accountant in New York City, then I'm going to have to pay that New York City person some differential because it's so expensive to live there. They need to get paid at a higher rate. Differentials are often offered by U.S. geographical locations, just like I just explained. Okay, alternatives to job-based pay. I can have delayering, or I can go through skill-based pay systems. You can read through those in the book. Compa ratio is the ratio of pay to the midpoint of the pay range. Ensures that pay policies and practices match. There's just a calculation showing that. You can read through that in the book. Other issues affected by pay. There's pay during military duty. How should a company pay employees who are called up for active duty for an extended period of time? Different companies you have to have your own policy based on that. Pay for executives. How can executive compensation affect employees? Well, when they see the managers making $300,000 a year, it can be a little upsetting for them. Executive pay relevant to the pay structures and equity theory. There was a CEO who determined that all of his employees should make at least $70,000 per year. And he took a pay cut in order to fund that. It did run into problems. They were still trying to work it out, but it did turn into problems because the engineers who started at $70,000 were sitting next to administrative assistants who also started at $70,000, and they weren't happy. So they were trying to work out that structure. So the average CEO pay at 300 large U.S. companies, their pay is made up by salary, which is only like 12% of their take home. 22% is bonuses. I set a certain objective. If you go to the Super Bowl, I'm going to pay your office staff a bonus. And stock options makes up 60% of their pay. So that's it for chapter 12. Moving on.